we have panelists today who are active in the Arts and Crafts Society of Central New York. In fact, two of my co-panelists are fellow board members, Beth Crawford, who's vice president, and Charles Tremper, who is treasurer. And then we have our former president, David Rudd, who's joining us as well. And David, of course, now wears the hat as the president of the Gustav Stickley House Foundation. And then doing our wrap-up work and handling the chat with me will be Amy Strook-Perez, who is an indefatigable worker in both organizations, but she's really been most active in the last year with a lot of the organization and development work for the Stickley House Foundation project going forward. And we'll hear more about that at the end.
Last few years.
Last few years, yes, time flies.
Seems like just a few minutes.
Where it's due.
Just a few minutes. So Beth, are you, if you can just identify yourself and say hi, and there's Beth, and she'll be joining us in a bit, and David, and Amy and I. We hope there'll be some time at the end for a bit of Q&A. Really, we're giving 4 mini talks, mini lectures, each of which is deserving of a full session, and maybe we'll do that at some later time. But we wanted to give you a taste of the Stickley House and its environs and what's happening these days. I'm going to start off with a bit of a general overview of the Stickley House's place on Columbus Avenue and in the Westcott neighborhood. And then Charles will talk a little bit about living on Columbus Avenue, where he's been a resident for 44 years. And I'll show some pictures of the street, and then we'll segue into David's discussion about the history of the Stickley House and a bit about Gus himself. And then Beth will bring us up to date on what's happening with the restoration project, particularly in phase 2, which we're looking forward to happening in the coming year. But the timetable depends on funding and other circumstances. So I'm going to share a screen and just hold on with me while I do that, because oops, sorry, not that screen. Hold on, share screen. I had it set up, and of course I lost that when we my computer program. So let's see. This should be showing up momentarily.
Oh.
Why don't you speak, David, while I'm doing this?
Well, I'm I sent a chat out to everyone, but in case you aren't familiar with the chat or haven't used it, so if you do have questions as we are going through, there's a little thing at the bottom of your screen that says chat. So if you have a question, go ahead and type your question in there, and then we'll have them. So at the end of the presentation, we can address those questions, but it'll be great if we have them in advance. Oops. Is that enough filler for you there, Sam?
Yeah, this should be showing.
There you go.
There we go.
Okay.
Perfect.
All right. So I'm going to do this as quickly as I can. The Stickley House, as you know, is on Columbus Avenue. Columbus Avenue was renamed probably sometime after the 1893 Columbus celebration of the 400th anniversary in 1893. This is an 1892 map of Syracuse, and Columbus Avenue is what was then South Park Street, which is the 500 block, and Henry Avenue, which is the 400 block. In fact, Henry Avenue wasn't used much. It was the center of a tract of land known as the Rosenblum tract, And as you can see here, it had not yet been developed. There was a little bit of development on Hawthorne in 1892, but the upper block, the block between Hawthorne and Dell Street, was the most concentrated site of development in the Westcott neighborhood in that early phase. At this time, we had a streetcar going down Westcott Street as far as the junction here, and it would soon extend by around 1900 down to Euclid and do a loop all the way over to the university. And that's when development in the area really took off. The development here filled in by 1824, and this is the 1824 map of the city. And it's really this area here that we're looking at. By that time, every lot had been built upon. So in a period between the early 1890s and the early 1920s, not only was the Rosenblum tract and all the areas around it built up, but also most of the greater Westcott neighborhood. And it went from a connected neighborhood with the downtown and then the growing east side, and this is Walnut Avenue, just on the other side of Thorndon Park, which developed in the 1870s, 80s, and continued into the 90s with its big Queen Anne style houses. It connected with that area across down Madison Street and along East Genesee, but it also was the entry point for what would become a whole new neighborhood, which we now know as Westcott. The city was expanding eastward and filling up farmland, and people wanted to build more spacious homes like this on nice broad streets with greenery. And that's what Rosenblum offered them in that tract, or that's what he hoped to offer them there. This is actually a house on Walnut, and this is the house where the Stickleys lived before they moved to Columbus in 1901. And is that right? In 101 or 2 they moved there?
1900.
Yeah, David will fill in those historical details. There was a lot of development in the area. This is for a tract in Hillsdale, which is closer to the university, where sort of Euclid is, Comstock, Ostrom, that area. And it's from 1891. And you can see that the houses recommended are kind of Queen Anne style, and they're going to be laid out on a rectilinear grid. The Rosenblum tract is going to offer something different, a more scenic arrangement with the curving street. And the first houses that went up in the neighborhood are in that older Queen Anne style. This is the Loomis House on the right, the greenhouse, which was built by the developers Loomis, father and son, who were building in the Westminster tract. And this is a house on the corner of Allen and Harvard, which was the first house built in that area around 1890. This trend continued well into the late 1890s and early 1900s, and the lower part of, or the upper part, depending on your sense of direction, the northern part of Westcott Street filled in, and we have fine houses like the Levy Chapman House on Westcott Street. Sorry, I just didn't put the number in there, about 1895, which unfortunately was remodeled a few years ago and given some ugly vinyl. This was in the process. But on the other hand, we have the Babcock Shattuck House, which has been beautifully restored. And both of those are on Westcott near East Genesee. We have Columbus here being developed right around that time. Again, this is the 1892 map, but by 1908, which is the next view we have, it is substantially filled in, and Rosenblum built at least 6 large houses, and the spaces between them have now been built with later houses from about 1917, 1920. These are 2 of the oldest and original houses, and actually Charles once lived in this house. He owned this house about 40 or 50 years ago, 40 years ago, I guess. And it was called the Rosenblum House. It's not sure whether he actually lived there. It was built around 1901. And then this is the Stickley House, more or less across the street. A number of these houses still exist, of the original ones. Some of them are in relatively good condition, like this one, the Harriet Truier House at near East Genesee. and this one at 429 Columbus, which is quite attractive. A few of them have been remodeled. These are two of the early ones, the Hills Adams House and the Kingsley House, which have been remodeled in more recent times. And one big house, one of the original houses, the Thomas More House, was demolished in 1960, and that's what it replaces it. That's the only real loss on the street. Otherwise, Columbus is quite intact. So Stickley, we'll hear how he moved into this Queen Anne house and remodeled it. His influence wasn't so strong on these older streets around Westcott and Columbus, but his influence had to wait until the publication of the Craftsman magazine and the dissemination of his ideas. So we go into the next decade, starting around 1908 through the 1920s, we get a real a tide of craftsman influenced houses spreading out on the greater Westcott neighborhood as they spread out across the country. There's a transition that you can see very clearly on some of the streets like Concord, where you have this house, which is more like the ones on Columbus, although it is shingle sided and it is, has a bit of a craftsman look. But then you have down the street this beautiful house that was designed by Lamont Warner, who was actually working for Stickley at the time. And the same thing on Victoria, you have a very elaborate Queen Anne house, which is one of the first built on the street. And then by about 1904, you have another house, a transitional house, also built by Lamont Warner. So Stickley influenced a number of architects in the area, Lamont Warner, Clarence Congdon, and Ward Wellington Ward. The Craftsman magazine and just the general knowledge of what was emanating from the Stickley House and the Stickley sort of brain trust had a great influence. And you can see Congdon, for instance, is definitely emulating a lot of the Stickley and the Craftsman style. And this is his house, which is up on Clarendon, still stands today. And you can see it just below. Okay. So, and Ward Wellington Ward on Westcott and on Allen Street, both houses, which are very well maintained. So I'll just end with this slide, which shows the ubiquity of these craftsman houses by about 1915, 1917, 18, and they are now being offered as kit houses through catalogs, and anyone can buy them, and they're quite affordable. Charles, are you on here? Do we have you? I hope we do, but I'm not sure. I know you were telephoning in. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead then and just give you a quick tour of the street, and maybe we'll save the anecdotes for later in the Q&A. Charles can tell you how the street has improved over the years. He's been there for 44 years, and this is his house, a beautiful house at the corner of East Genesee. It's from a second phase of building from the 1920s, when this house and the house next to it on East Genesee, and these two houses, which are duplexes that are just up from East Genesee on the east side, were built around 1920. And we've seen these other big houses here. And then around 1917, Beth Crawford has documented some of this, the dating of some of this. We have infill housing between these larger ones. So the lots were cut up, and a number of these smaller houses were put in at that time. Some of them have seen better days. This is a very unfortunate remodeling of just last year. This was the house across, obliquely across from the Stickley House, and this is what the present owners have done. Rather than restoring it, they've enclosed the porches. But it's still a very pretty street, and it's been wonderful to see it revive. I've been in the neighborhood for almost 30 years, and I was leery about walking there a lot when I first moved to the neighborhood, but now I walk there regularly, and it's a really great place. Charles, who works at the university, just retired from the library, has been walking from his house on the corner of East Genesee and Columbus to the university for decades, and without incident. Don't go there after trash day. There's still a lot of cans and recycling thrown around, but on a nice day, things are looking up on Columbus Avenue, and obviously the restoration of the Stickley House is a great impetus for the further improvement of the street. So I turn it over to you, David, and you can just say next, and I'll move these slides forward. Oh, I need to unmute you. Okay, you have to unmute. Can you unmute yourself? Let's see.
Okay, now you can hear me.
I can hear you.
Okay, my screen for Zoom has disappeared. And I have no idea why.
Are you seeing, so you're seeing nothing?
I'm seeing nothing. Let me see.
How about everybody else? Are you still sharing the?
I can see a few people on my screen, but I can't see what I'm talking about. So, I mean, I can go through the slides. I have my PowerPoint up next to me.
Okay, do that.
Or I can share this screen.
Well,
why don't I just go through the slides?
Show them. I know what you have there. I have the same.
Okay, so
this is Gus Stickley right on the front.
Right, this is Gustav Stickley. He was welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us tonight to this Zoom talk. So Gus Stickley was born in Osceola, Wisconsin. He was one of 11 siblings. He made it through 12 years of, he was 12 years old when he left school and started working with his father in the stonemasonry business. At one point, his father left for work and never came back. Oops. So his mother actually packed up 11 siblings, or I think 10 siblings. I think she actually left one behind. But okay. It was a daughter. She was like 16 years old, and she was working for as a house aide for a couple in Osceola. But anyways, left with most of the children and went.
Sorry, I'll get you unmuted, David.
Okay.
Go ahead, David.
So at the age of 18, Gus's mother took the children and went to Brant, Pennsylvania. And Brant, Pennsylvania is about 25 miles southeast of Binghamton, where his uncle had a furniture factory. And this was his first introduction to furniture. He was up to this time, it was all about rocks. So this was probably a nice endeavor for him, or a nice switch for him. So he got his formal training. By the time he was in his early 20s, he had become foreman of the shop, and stayed there with his brothers. There was 4 other brothers that went to work in the furniture factory as well. I'm not sure what the rest of the siblings ended up doing, but he left Brant and moved to Binghamton with 3 of his brothers, and they started the Stickley Brothers Company in Binghamton. And they were making like country style bent back arm chairs and rockers and things like that. Most of his business was in chairs, because he was considered it was considered a chair factory. While he was there, he got an offer, or I'm not sure how he ended up there, but he ended up heading up a furniture endeavor by the Auburn prison in Auburn, New York. And this is where he started meeting people from Syracuse. I mean, you kind of wonder how he made it to Syracuse. Well, this was the way he made it to Syracuse. So he was able to get a loan and buy his factory on Burnett Avenue, and that's Burnett between Midler and Thompson Road on the south side of the street. It's now a plumbing supply place, and it's changed dramatically over the last 40 years. And I say 40 years because that's when I first noticed it, or maybe 42 years ago, 41 years ago. But 40 years ago, it still had the dust collector on the end of the building, and it was a wood structured part of the building. And then there was a cement block addition put on. And then eventually the dust collector came down, and there was the wood frame part came down. And right now, I think it only shares like a cellar wall or something with the original factory. But anyway, that factory was referred to as the chair factory as well when he first moved in there. Let's see, the next slide, please. Next.
Okay, it's up there. It's the map of the Rosen.
Okay, sorry. So this is what Sam was showing you before. This is the Rosenblum trust plot where he was selling and actually speccing homes out. And Gustav Stickley bought one that was designed by architect Wellington Tabor, who was a Syracuse grad in architecture. And it's in the fine print there. It describes the house as being thoroughly modern. Next slide. So I don't know if most of you are aware, but I have a shop and I buy and sell Stickley furniture. And one of the most frequent questions asked me is, where is the Gus house? So a lot of you probably are totally aware of where it is, but I just took these screenshots of my cell phone. The one on the left, it shows where it is compared to, oh no, the one on the left is where he moved from, that Sam showed you where the house was on Walnut. And the one on the right is the trip that if he were to walk to his house on Columbus Avenue, that's the route he would take through the park, and it would take him about 20 minutes. So in December of 1901, Christmas Eve, there was a chimney fire, and the fire, it was discovered by Beth Crawford of Crawford and Stearns that the fire was in a chimney that was taken out of the house after the fire, and it was kind of a center hallway chimney. And the fire went in both directions, towards the front and toward the front north side, and the rear south side of the house, pretty much destroying probably 70 or more % of the first floor and 30 or 40, 50% of the second floor. And in this article, he actually describes the house as the writer describes the house as a handsome 2.5-story residence of Gustav Stickley, president of the Gustav Stickley Company. And further on, he goes, one of the most thoroughly modern residents of the eastern section of the city. So it sounded like he was doing quite well for himself, and the fire was kind of a disaster for him. While the firemen were putting the fire out, his brother Charles and his family was traveling up from Binghamton to join him for Christmas Eve. And when they got there, the firemen were still putting the fire out. The next slide. So if he left Columbus Avenue and he was walking and he didn't stop at McDonald's, he would be at his furniture factory in about 45 minutes on Burnett Ave. So it's not far away. And I believe there was actually a trolley that went down Burnett Ave. I'm not sure about the Teal Ave, but there could have even been a trolley that had gone down Teal Ave, because Teal Ave had been there for quite a while, and it stretched all the way to the north side. Next slide. So this is a few pieces of furniture that were done done about 1901, late 1900, 1901, and into 1902. But you can see, if you look at the dinner gong, on either side of the uprights inside of the void, there are two corbels. Those are those two brackets holding the top horizontal piece in place. Remember that. And then on the blanket chest, you see them again, framing the panel. Remember those. And the chamfered boards on the plate rail. You want to remember that. These are all construction techniques that he employed while he was designing and building his furniture. So in 1902 of December, so it took about a year for them to get the house to the point where an artist can go in and do renditions, and a story could be written about the interior that Gustav Stickley remodeled his home to. It was the first craftsman interior in the country. And I use the word craftsman with a capital C because that was the name of his business. There were other, craftsman is also an adjective used by many companies, but when you refer to it with Gustav Stickley, it's typically the name of his company. If you wanted to read this in its entirety, you could Google the Craftsman, University of Wisconsin, and that'll get you to a link that will allow you to search and look through the full run of Craftsman magazines, the full 16 years of Craftsman magazines. And it's pretty interesting. There's some great articles in it. So the next slide. So this is where we start to see him use those construction techniques in the woodwork of his home. Besides the paneling, the wainscoting downstairs, which is all chamfered boards, you have these corbels on the door frames. Act as a decorative, kind of a decorative element there. Also, I wish I could actually point it out on the same screen you're looking at. But if you look where the wainscoting comes up to the middle of the doorways, and you see like between the door on the far left and the door in the center and the door in the center and the door on the far right, you can see how there's a little ledge there that overlaps the vertical door jamb or door frame. And that's another detail that he started using on his furniture. Now, you have to remember that Gustav had three architect designers working for him. There was, let's see, there was Henry Wilkinson, Lamont Warner, who you saw designed a few other homes in the Westcott Street area, and Claude Bragdon, who came in from Rochester. And Claude Bragdon was ended up being a very good friend of Gustav Stickley's and knew him for quite a while. Henry Wilkinson was obviously a local architect and a superb designer. He did probably the majority of the work that Gustav Stickley did in furniture, and I think maybe spent the most time with Gus as well. So let's see, the next slide. In the Craftsman, in this article that Samuel Howe wrote, A Visit to Mr. Stickley's House, he fortunately drew floor plans. So this, and he drew furniture in the floor plans. So this kind of gave us a good feel for what he had in there. This and what the Wiles family inherited from Gus. You can see in the left-hand floor plan, you can see the first room off the porch there going up the page. You can see a hex table. And then in the dining room, you could see the large dining room table with the 7 chairs around and a couple other chairs. And then against that wall in the dining room, you could see the big sideboard. And that's where the sideboard that Barbara Streisand bought that kind of brought the collecting of Craftsman furniture into the mainstream design world. So the hex table that's in this front would have been a table like this. That's a leather covered hex table made about the same time that the house was remodeled. This is a photo of, oh, I'm sorry, the hex table. Did you saw that? Right?
Yeah, I got it. I got it.
And then the next slide. Right, the next slide is the center hallway where that hex table would have sat, right in front of the rug where you see it in a little illustration there. And it was fun. We had an open house in the house a couple of years ago, and one of the great grandsons came in from Seattle, Washington to join us. That was at the Pump House event. I don't know if I know a few of you were able to make it. But he got up on the stage there, that top step going up the staircase, because if you look carefully on your right, you'll see a door there. So that whole area where the door is was not there originally. You can see it in the illustration where the stairs take a right-hand turn to go upstairs. So the kids used to use that platform up there as a place to perform. And so this gentleman got on the platform, and at the age of 80 something, he recited a poem that he used to recite there when Gus was living there and when he would go to visit his grandfather. This is a picture of the dining room and into the Ingle Nook on the first floor. And the bench that's in the line drawing that's on the left wall of the Ingle Nook is the bench that we have on view at the Onondaga Historical Association. They have a very nice show going on there on American Arts and Crafts, have an original bookcase that the family very graciously donated to the foundation to be used in the house. And so that'll be another piece. The bench probably won't be used in the house, but it's a great piece to see and go and experience the scale of it and the design of it. The next is an upstairs fireplace. And this is in Gus's study off the main front bedroom. And that'll be one of the suites that gets created, the bedroom, and then this will be the sitting room. And this was, the tiles used in this were done by the Gruber Pottery Company out of Boston, Massachusetts. And it was about the only company that Gus collaborated with ceramics. Later on, he sold some ceramics out of the Craftsman building in Manhattan, but for his furniture, for his early stuff, 1900, 1901, 1902, and going forward, probably till about 1910. I think by 1910, he was no longer producing furniture with tiles, but he would use these beautiful green, organic looking tiles in his tabletops. Next slide. So this photo, I put it here because, again, Beth Crawford, Crawford and Stearns was able to find this. We didn't have any photos of what the house looked like. The house basically looked like this when we got it. The next slide. So you see the front view and the back view of the house. And you can see the porch on the front of the house. Well, it originally looked like this. Go back a slide. And so this is how they were able to recreate the front porch on the house. So forward to another slide. So this is what we had to start with, and this is where we are now. And up another slide.
Oops.
Forward.
That's the last one.
Last slide, yes.
So we're going to turn it over to
Yep.
Beth, but do you want to sum up with anything, David?
Yeah, my 8 minutes are up.
Yeah, well, we are okay. Beth is going to share the screen.
Wish I could
I'm
see
going to
it.
stop sharing. She's going to put her slides up from her her computer. So, Beth, are you able to do that? You're good. Oh, you're muted. Okay, sorry, we have to unmute you.
Hello.
There we go.
Hi. I'm going to try to share my screen now. Does that work?
Yep.
Excellent. Hi, everyone. I'm Beth Crawford. I'm a project manager and designer with Crawford and Stearns Architects here in Syracuse. And I'm going to talk a little bit about our investigation and documentation at the house, as well as show you a little bit of the before and after of phase 1, and then talk a little bit about what's planned for phase 2. So the investigation and documentation process probably started about 5 years ago. And we have done everything from the documentation drawings. We worked with local documentation photographer Bruce Harvey on photographic documentation. We had a paint study done, which I'll show you a little bit about. We worked on the contract documents for phase 1 and worked with the contractor who was selected. And we've worked with the Gustav Stickley House Foundation on the design for phase 2, the interior restoration, and are currently working on historic structure report for the house. And some of the things that Dave mentioned are some of the things that came out of doing the research on the property. And what Sam had mentioned about some of the neighborhood things, we were looking at city directories, trying to understand the evolution of the Rosenblum tract. So these are just a few photos of working on the house over the last 5 years. And I'm just gonna go through our slides. So early on, we were doing documentation specifically about the exterior, trying to understand the front porch. Here's Ted Bartlett from our office, who was with me up on the lift when we figured out that all this fire damage was actually from the 1901 Christmas Eve fire. So a lot of that was covered over with new shingles, but the fire damage still existed on the sheathing boards. And so that was a really interesting discovery of the house to understand the extent of the fire. The house was severely deteriorated when the University Neighborhood Preservation Association, who did the phase 1 restoration, acquired the property. There was significant amount of deterioration. This is a chimney that literally was a day away from collapse before the contractor was able to disassemble it and save the bricks. But the building had been vacant for 20 years. It was severely threatened. There was uncontrolled water damage and a lot of deferred maintenance. So some of the things that we were doing were documenting these things before they completely failed. We were able to uncover under the porch some of the stone pieces that you can see on the lower left there that were from the original porch, and some of the capstones existed. Someone had literally tossed them under the porch, and we were able to document them and have them replicated. These were broken and really unusable, but they gave us the exact sizes of the capstones. It was a really good find. And then the columns were an interesting story because when they replaced the porch came off somewhere probably in the 1950s, possibly early 60s, but they actually reused the original 1900 columns. So these are the Queen Anne or Colonial Revival, whatever you want to call it, front porch columns someone had reused. And one way that we realized or were able to determine that these columns were the original columns were based on the paint study. They had the same paint layering as the trim paint on the rest of the house. So we were able to actually reuse some of these. We didn't have all the columns, and we were able to have columns exactly replicated to match the original 1900 columns. So here's a drawing of the front of the house showing the proposed porch. This was a few years ago. This is probably a drawing from 2017. And this is a list of work that happened under the exterior restoration phase 1 work. Abatement was one of the key things that we wanted to get done. There was some asbestos in the building, so that was all removed. The key thing for the building was to get a new roof on it. And the really surprising thing was that there was a very early, and I suspect 1902, wood shingle roof still on the building. It had many layers of roofing on it, but we found green shingled, green wood shingles stained on the roof. And so that was an interesting discovery. But we did everything from window restoration, exterior siding repair, shingle repair, masonry repointing. The chimneys were in really, really bad shape. Here are a few drawings from phase 1. They show the design for the new front porch, some of those stone replication pieces, and the roof floor plan, the roof plan up in the upper left-hand corner there. We worked with Environmental Design and Research, locally known as EDR, their landscape architecture and engineering firm here in Syracuse. We had worked with them before on some renderings and some historic sites, and worked with Joe Falco, who's actually a neighbor who lives down the street at Genesee and Columbus Ave. And Joe produced this really fabulous rendering. Now, this was done before the porch was built. So this was to show the Crawford and Stearns' vision of the replication of the porch. Some of the other work in phase 1 included window restoration, molding and millwork replication. This is the start of the new front porch, and working with the contractor, Gary Wright, on the built-in gutter restoration. We found we found historic bricks that matched exactly the bricks on the Stickley foundation for the new front porch. This is one of my favorites. That is young Peter Wiles there, standing in front of the front door. So this is the front door of the Stickley House, and this is really the only exterior artifact of the craftsman work that Stickley did in 1902. So he did just about everything inside the house and then replaced the front door and the surround. When we started the project, it was painted white, had been painted white for a number of years, and the restoration crew restored the chestnut front door. Early on, in around 2016-17, we worked with a paint analysis company out of Rhode Island, and worked with them on what we believe was the second paint scheme. So this is not the 1900 paint scheme. So Gus bought a house that was just about complete. The Syracuse newspapers say that the house that he bought, this Queen Anne style house on Columbus Avenue, was just about complete. And it actually describes the interior, which when I read it, I read a very, turn of the century Queen Anne style house, the way they describe it in 1900. So what we wanted was the second color scheme. This was this color scheme that Gus would have picked, and this was the post-fire color scheme. So here's a few photos of the exterior after painting and after exterior restoration, including the chimney restoration and the window restoration. Here are some details on the new front porch. And here's the before, the proposed, and the after. I saw somebody say, yeah, wow. In June of 2018, we had a big celebration, and the city was good enough to close the street for us. And my friend Walter Miller brought a couple of historic cars, and we had a wonderful celebration of the exterior. And the headline was that the mission was partially accomplished. So this is the end of phase 1, and now we're looking towards phase 2. So the phase 2 interior restoration is to create a unique historic house museum with 5 guest rooms on the 2nd and 3rd floor. And we would preserve and restore the historic craftsman elements, and the public rooms would be restored and open for the public for tours, for lectures, for events. And then the 5 private guest suites would be on the 2nd and 3rd floor. And since the 1940s, there's actually been an apartment in the basement, and we need a caretaker apartment. So the caretaker apartment would actually be in that basement apartment. The Wiles family actually established that apartment that was in the basement. It was greatly modified in the 1980s, but we'll be actually going back and reusing that apartment with a lot of modifications. And then in the rear, we're going to be adding a new addition at the, that will be the accessible entrance. It will have a fire-rated stair. It will have a small elevator called a lula, and will provide an accessible toilet for visitors to the house. On the top is the 1902 illustration that David showed you before. So this is the first floor plan. I've turned it horizontally, so the north is to the top of the page. And then the lower drawing is the drawing that we prepared for the Gustav Stickley House Foundation to help them fundraise and come up with a design for reuse of the house. So all the green area will be restored areas. The gray area at the far left is the addition, where you would be able to come in here at grade at the rear entry, and then you could walk up a set of steps and be on the main first floor level, or you can get on the lula here and then go up a half a level and get off at the first floor. This is the enclosed fire stair, and then this is the public toilet room. So what used to be the Stickley and the Wiles pantry, which was removed many years ago, possibly in the 60s. This was the old pantry. You'd actually pass through the old pantry, and that would be the new rear entry hall to the facility. This is one historic photo. We only have one historic photo from the period when Gus lived in the house. This is a really fabulous 1902 glass plate negative that is at Winterthur in Delaware. And it is so crisp and so clear. You can see the broken piece of glass right here on the corner, which I find really interesting. If you're local and can make your way to Onondaga Historical Association, on the 2nd floor in their exhibit right now is this cabinet right here, as well as the settle bench. It's not a settle bench, it's a bench. In the Ingle Nook back here is also on display there. And this is the Columbus Avenue sideboard that had been purchased by Barbara Streisand and is now going to be in the Arts and Crafts Museum in Florida when they do open. So Dave showed a few of these, but these are the significant first floor rooms that will be restored, the dining room, the Ingle Nook, the stair hall, and we have really wonderful documentation from these renderings from 1902. So some people look at the interior and say, wow, it's in really great shape, but there are a lot of issues. As I mentioned before, there's a lot of water damage. The house was used as apartments from approximately 1945 and then definitely 1955, but the family was renting out rooms in the 1940s all the way to 1995. It's a lot of Syracuse University students. It's a lot of wear and tear. Norm Roth, local property owner, had actually purchased the house and lived here and did a lot of work in the 80s, but subsequently, a lot of water damage. You can see how the finishes are worn. The photo on the right is a former bathroom that was very water damaged, so all the drywall has been removed. But there are rotted sections of plaster and lath, and then all the mechanical, electrical, and plumbing systems are deteriorated and antiquated and are holding on by kind of the skin of their teeth. This is one of my favorite rooms. This is the front living room. And the hood that is on that fireplace, there was a matching one, slightly different in size, in the Inglenook fireplace. So that was a really interesting discovery. It's really wonderfully detailed. And if you want to see more about the fireplaces, there's actually a video on the Gustav Stickley House Foundation called For Fireplaces that tells you a little bit more about the 4 different fireplaces. There are 2 Gruby tile fireplaces on the 2nd floor, and then 2 brick and basically steel fireplaces on the 1st floor. Here's a couple of renderings that the Gustav Stickley House Foundation commissioned by a firm out of Auburn, New York. And these were their photorealistic renderings to show what a restored interior could possibly look like. In the foreground on the upper photo, you can see the hex table that David was describing earlier. Here are a few documentation drawings that we're working on currently. These are the stair hall and I believe the front living room. Gus did not call it the parlor, he called it the living room. It was the room where you lived, it was your living room. So these help describe where certain areas were changed and modified. So here on the right side, originally the Stickley family would have had a piano in this location here, and there would have been a light fixture hanging above the piano here. But in the 1960s, when there were a whole lot of young women renting rooms at the house from Irving Frank, the then landlord of the house, he cut a hole in this wall to put a doorway into the entry vestibule. And so this area here is now pine V-groove paneling and will need to be restored. The rest of all the woodwork in the house is actually on the walls is V-groove chestnut. Here on the 2nd floor, again, the 1902 Craftsman magazine on the top. The house had 4 primary bedrooms on the 2nd floor, originally 1 bathroom here, which actually has an original sink and an original tub, which I would very much like to reuse. I joke about it, but it's the sink that Gus shaved at. Wouldn't you want to, shave where Gus shaved? So this is the room that David referred to as Mr. Stickley's study. And this is off the master bedroom. And so here, this becomes suite 1 for the restoration and rehabilitation of the house. The Wiles family actually put a bathroom in here at the 2nd floor hallway. And so we'll be keeping that bathroom in order to achieve this suite with its bathroom. So you'd have a sitting room and a bedroom. And then suite 2 is again 2 rooms with a small bathroom, and here we took 3 closets and converted those into a small bathroom there. And then suite 3 actually takes the advantage of this corner sleeping porch, which was not original to 1900 or 1902, but probably happened sometime between 1905 and 1920. But it's a really nice room. It had been used for the last part of the house as a kitchen. And then again, the gray area is the new addition. So here are a few views of the second floor. Dave showed you that Mr. Stickley's room, complete with a canoe and paddles hanging from the ceiling. The Gruber tile, which is in desperate need of restoration. And there's a lot of water damage from roof water many years ago. There's no more water coming in now, but the damage has been done. Dave showed you the head of the staircase view. And this is on the top center is the other Gruber fireplace, not as large, but this is in one of the children's back bedrooms. And you can also see some of the damage to the ceiling above there. Here's another one of the foundations renderings for the front bedroom. And the upper photo is its condition today. The third floor was actually where probably Gus spent his most time in this house. He, after leaving the house and selling it in 1911 and moving to New Jersey, he had been living in an apartment in New York and developing Craftsman Farms in New Jersey from about 1908 till he could convince his family to move there they moved there in 1910. The rest of the family in Syracuse moved to Craftsman Farms in 1910, and Gus sold the house in 1911. In 1919, his daughter, Barbara Stickley Wiles, buys the house back from the Fleischman family. And shortly thereafter, either in 1919 or 1920, Gustav moves back to the house. And based on interviews with Ben Wiles Jr., who grew up in the house with Gus, Ben passed away just about a year ago. And Ben described this room in the northeast corner of the third floor as being his grandfather's bedroom. And this is this photo pictured here. So up here, it's really interesting because there is no Craftsman detailing up here. So all the trim up here reflects the 1900 period. It wasn't his apartment. There were other children of the Wiles family that had bedrooms up here as well. So, but the suite 5 would be a 2-room suite with a bathroom, and it has a 1-bedroom and then a sitting room, and will probably have like a sleep sofa. So if 2 people wanted to share the room, they could. And then the other suite is suite 4 here, shown in blue. And then again, the exit stair with the lula off the back of the house.
Beth, we're going to have to wrap it up and
I am turning it over to Amy.
Oh, perfect timing. Okay, thanks for that. Really detailed, more than I thought. I mean, we could give you a full session for that. I love seeing a lot of those images, which I've never seen before, about the plans going forward. And we're going to turn it over to Amy Strook-Perez, who is going to give us an update on the foundation and how the foundation is going forward, an amazing grant that has been received, and what we can all do to help the project.
And don't worry, mine's the shortest.
But the most important.
So one of the things, well, thank you guys. One of the things that I did want to point out is how much of a collaboration this whole project has been. You know, phase 1, the house was under the ownership of the University Neighborhood Preservation Association. In phase 2, the ownership of the property is actually passed to the Greater Syracuse Land Bank. So they are now our nonprofit partner. The Gustav Stickley House Foundation really operates as a separate entity, as a friends group, if you will. And our number one job is to raise money to help make all of this magic happen. But we also are working very closely with the Onondaga Historical Association, who will be the ultimate owners of the property and operators of the property as this unique historic house museum / guest house, which will really be an amazing addition, not only to our community, but that's specifically to that neighborhood that's working very hard to use architecture as a means to advancing sort of civic pride, civic development, pride of place. And so this is a really exciting project for us to be a part of. So as Beth had mentioned earlier, phase one came to an end in 2000, excuse me, in 2018. And since then, we've done a couple of things, obviously worked on the plans and all those wonderful pictures that you were just looking at, developing where we want to go. And then in the latter part of 2019, and Beth, if you can advance me, I don't think I can. There we go.
Nope.
Okay. There you go. We established a really phenomenal capital campaign committee with the work, with the assistance of Matt Chatterton, who's the owner of Blue Water Strategies. He's a fundraising consultant. And so we've put together what we're really proud of. Our two co-chairs for our campaign are Joni Mahoney, who has just recently been promoted or has accepted the position of president of SUNY ESF, as well as Tom Felicia, who is a well-known interior designer. He's based in New York, but he's from our area. He's from the Syracuse area, and he is very interested in helping us sort of take that next step. And then there's a number of community members. Obviously, some of the foundation board, myself included, are part of this group. And some of the family descendants are on this committee as well. So we got this group together in late 2019. And then in March, we had this fabulous kickoff event at the Everson Museum. And here's some photos from that event. We had around 100 people were there. It was on March the 5th. It may have been the last time that any of the people in that room did any kind of social interaction because shortly thereafter, we got COVID. And clearly COVID has changed the dynamic on so many levels for all of us in so many ways. Oh, yes, I'm so sorry. Thank you, Beth. We also, at this event, we were very privileged to get to see the Syracuse premiere of this wonderful movie, Gustav Stickley, American Craftsman. You can see a picture of us watching the film in the Everson's wonderful space there. And Herb Stratford is the gentleman there in the bottom left-hand corner, and he is the producer of this film. Lost my train of thought. So after the kickoff event, we basically kind of took a long, hard thought consideration of where we are, what we're trying to accomplish, and really what was kind of going on in the world as a whole. I mean, COVID hit many nonprofits who have, staff and bills to pay that we don't have, and clearly the larger community and the impact. We felt it was best to sort of take a step back from trying to continue to do any sort of fundraising. And then certainly when it came to events, it's not a safe time to get together and gather as a community. So we took a pause on our activities, trying to keep people abreast of sort of what was happening. But in July, and Beth, if you wouldn't mind moving forward, in July, we were so excited to receive one of these very literally treasured, coveted Save America's Treasures grants. We applied for this grant last December, and we we just kind of didn't think that the government was going to do anything. And so in July, we got this, everybody was, did this really happen? I mean, it was so exciting. So we were one of 42 grants that were awarded for the year. We were the highest recipient in the state of New York. There were 5, as you can see, 5 projects that received funding, and 500,000 is the maximum you can receive. So this project received the maximum. It is a matching grant, which means for every dollar that we want to spend out of that 500,000, we have to raise a matching dollar. And this project will specifically go towards the protection, the restoration of the historic elements, correcting the water damage, as well as providing universal access, and improves the life safety conditions in the house. So there's a whole bunch of different components that will go into that. And this is why we need to do this. And you've seen some of these images, but we like to talk about all the pretty stuff, all the craftsman details, which make this house so important, but it's not really that pretty stuff that is causing the structure as a whole to be at risk. It's this stuff. It's these pictures, the water damage, the wear and tear of a 100-plus-year-old building with multiple tenants and all kinds of life and activity that have gone on in there. So we are re-engaging with our capital campaign, and we're excited about that. We still obviously need to be cautious. We still aren't going to be doing any sort of great, fundraising events, at least not for the foreseeable future. But we need your help. We need anyone's help, and there's a number of ways that you can do that. I've listed the website here, obviously on the screen, and I will. In the chat, there's the link to the support page. That is part of our greater website. If you haven't had a chance, excuse me, to take a look at that, there's a lot of other information about what we've done and where we're going. So my goal is to thank you all for being here, for being interested, for caring about what it is that we're doing, and to encourage you to become part of this amazing opportunity. You can follow us, you can sign up for our email list, you can support us with a financial donation. But we're really grateful that you showed up tonight and took time out of your evening to be with us. And we hope that you'll follow us, and down the line, we hope to see you at the house and have the chance to sort of experience this craftsman wonder. Before I choke, I'm going to get some water.
Thank you.
Done.
Thank you, Amy. We're over the time that we had stated. I foolishly thought we could present this in an hour. Clearly, an hour and a half would have been more appropriate. So I think we'll stay on till 8:30, which gives us 15 minutes for some Q&A. I don't know, Charles, were you ever able to join us? There are a couple phone numbers there I don't recognize in there, but if not, we'll get Charles back for another session, and maybe socially distanced. I will follow him with a camera, and he can walk up and down Columbus and tell some stories. We can open it up to chat if people have specific or general questions about the house, the project, the neighborhood. And I do want to just urge you to support the project. Everyone should be like making a regular donation to the food pantry. And there are so many social action programs that need money right now to help needy people, and we shouldn't stint on those. But a lot of us, I travel for work usually, and I have not traveled in almost 9 months. Early March was my last out of town trip. So that means I've saved a lot of money, haven't made as much money, but I saved a lot of money from not traveling. So I'm trying to pass that on to local charities, to the not-for-profits, the arts organizations, and some of the social action organizations. And I encourage you all to do the same. Even, you know, a $25 gift is $25, $50, $100, whatever you can afford. The more you can do. But if a lot of people make these gifts, you know, they go a long way. I'm not asking for money for the Arts and Crafts Society. We have actually extended memberships for people who had paid up last year because we had to curtail all of our programming. We will do an appeal for people to renew their membership in 2021. But I think you should take that money and give it to the Stickley House, or especially to the Stickley House Foundation, or if not that, then to some other very needy group. So let me turn it over if anyone wants to.
Sam, there's a couple of questions in the chat room.
In the chat. Okay, so.
And one is, what is that menorah in the background of the photo? So that is a candelabra, and it has 7 candles. So it is not a menorah, because a menorah would have 8 candles. And so this is a piece that it is, I believe, still in the family. And it shows up actually in one of the renderings as well. So
I'm actually going to correct you on that, Beth, because
you
it's
are
one of my ears. Yeah, 7 candles, 7 lamps is the menorah from the temple in Jerusalem. And in the 19th century, they became very popular as Sabbath lamps. My guess is if you took that lamp, you could probably actually turn the handles and it would give you a different shape. But early in the 20th century, they also just started casting them solid in brass. And you can buy them in Brooklyn or in Israel. They're all over the place. Many of them take the form of the menorah that's on the Arch of Titus in Rome. It's the 8 candles which are for the Hanukkah menorah, which is not technically a menorah, it's a Hanukkah for lamp. But what it tells us is, was this when who was living here when this photograph was taken?
This is from the
This was Stickley. So, you know, they may have picked it up or they may have been given it as a gift. They were popular, obviously, with Jewish families, but also with Christians as well. And Temple Concord has a collection of about 100 of these that was someone had collected and then donated to the congregation. So they're not rare, but they're quite you know, they make great mantle ornaments.
Any other questions? Is everyone off? I think everyone is unmuted if someone wants to speak up.
No, actually, I will unmute, but
there was another question that had to do with will there be any energy efficient elements as part of the restoration?
Sure. One of the things that we did at the Babcock Shattuck House around the corner, which was 4 units of condominiums that were rehabilitated by the University Neighborhood Preservation Association, was a high velocity hot air and air conditioning system. And we'd probably be looking at something similar to that. What's really nice about the high velocity is that the ducts are very small so that we can hide them in floor joists and things like that. So as well as high efficiency boilers and furnaces. So there is really terrible old insulation in the attic of the 3rd floor right now, and that will all get pulled out, and new insulation will be put in up in the attic. And as part of the phase 1 project, we were able to do custom storm windows on both the casements and the double hung windows. So I think other than the basement, we restored every single window under phase 1, and we're able to install either a metal or a wooden storm window. I think the 1st floor are all wooden storms, if I remember correctly. And then there are metal ones upstairs where they're not as visible, and that provides screens as well.
Also, Rick Fedrizzi, that's part of the Capital Campaign Committee. That's the industry that he's in as well. So I'm sure he'll have some input into some things that he could get for us.
So I didn't see any other questions in the chat if anyone had questions.
I think I've given everyone the power to unmute themselves if
Okay.
anyone wants to comment.
And we do want to mention that about the recording, Sam. Do you want to?
Yes, assuming this is recorded correctly, we will post this on the organization websites and I think on our Facebook pages. We will check it over first, but that will allow the 7 people who were stuck in the wait room for the first segment to catch up on that. And we can leave it up there. So if you want to share it with a larger audience. As I said, this is the first effort of the Arts and Crafts Societies. I think it's the second effort of the foundation to do a Zoom meeting, and we will try to do more and with fewer technical glitches. But we can also try to film a few short segments as video or audios and post these as well. It's something I would like to see us do over the winter because we won't be going out, both because of COVID and because of the weather. Maybe we can bring some of the architecture, art, and history of the community to you. Many of us on this call have rather large photo collections that we can draw from to explain and some of what we see when we live in neighborhoods and tell stories about the history of the places that we like to go.
Great. Thank you, Sam.
Sandy.
Yes.
Is the Stickley film available anyplace?
Dave?
It will be soon. It was just sold to a distributor. I think maybe sometime in March or April. And it will probably be aired, places like PBS, that kind of thing, in not too long. I don't know of any. I'm actually talking to the producer now, and we're trying to get it back in Syracuse for some sort of a small fundraiser. I was thinking of maybe it would be nice to have it aired at the Palace Theater or something.
That'd be great.
Or maybe open air next summer where we don't have to be.
Or maybe open air. Maybe we can.
We'll see how things go.
Can DVDs be made to be sold at the OHA or something?
That's possible.
Probably down the road.
I think Herb Stratford, he's still in the really kind of in the early phases of getting this
Right.
out commercially. So when we got to see it in March, it was still we weren't quite there yet. So, but yes, that the goal is that there will be public access.
Yeah, the showing in the Everson was only the second time it had been shown in public.
Speaking of films, I see Bill Bowen is on, and Bill's is such a Frank Lloyd Wright maven. There is a film that's streaming now, and I'll try to post the information. I think it's streaming for one more week. It's a new documentary on Wright's Unity Temple, and there you need to pay to watch it because they're trying to raise money. But I haven't seen it yet. I do plan to watch it this week. It's actually been up for a few weeks, and I forgot about it till the director sent us, the Arts and Crafts Society, a reminder just the other day. But if you want to get into architecture that we can't get into right now, we can watch movies, watch films.
Narrated by Brad Pitt, if that excites anyone.
Oh, I know my friend Joe Siri, who wrote a book about Unity Temple, is one of the talking heads. But I for Brad Pitt, sure, I'll pay the, what is it, $20 to watch it or something like that.
pop your own popcorn.
Well, if there are no other comments or questions, we can wrap it up and say goodnight to everyone. And stay safe, and we'll keep you posted. For those of you who don't know, and if you're on social media and Facebook, and I think a lot of you are because that's how you got the link to this, the Gustav Stickley House Foundation and the Arts and Crafts Society maintain fairly active Facebook pages. We did a series earlier during the pandemic called Warding Off the Virus, where we were trying to put up a different Ward Wellington Ward building every day. We got about 60 up, so there's still a lot more to go, and maybe we'll start that up again. But feel free to browse to those Facebook pages, and then of course check out the web pages as well. And if there are any of you with web or social media talents or tech talents for things like Zoom, please let us know, because we can definitely use the volunteers in those areas. I see a lot of people have about the same amount or more gray hair than I have, so we're not born to it. But if anyone wants to give it a try, please send us a note, an email to artscraftscny@gmail.com, or leave us a note on Facebook. And
Thanks, Sam.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Sam.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Harry Lewis, you look great.
Thank you.
Harry, you don't have any gray hair.
Good to see you, Harry.
And Sandy Gingo, good to see you, and a number of people out there. We're not seeing each other's faces in these days. Gary,
Hi, Sandy.
Hey, Bill.
Gary Slutsky.
Hi.
Anyway, Lynn Odell.
Thank you, friends and neighbors.
Stark, good to hear your voice. All right.
Okay, I'm going to say goodnight.
And I'm
Night. Thank
Good
you.
night, David.
Thanks,
Good night,
everyone.
everyone.
going to end it. There we go.